Though Nintendo was doing well with the N64, the console would run into another problem as it would develop a reputation as the de facto kiddie console of the generation. For good reason, too. While the N64 had Super Mario 64 and Wave Race 64, the PS1 had Twisted Metal and Resident Evil. Even today, that's how people perceive the N64, as the first games that come to mind are typically bright and colorful 3D platformers. However, anyone with a deeper knowledge of the console will know that there are plenty of games that skew older, and this is one of them. Based on the comic book of the same name, Turok was part of a marketing push by publisher Acclaim. The plan was to purchase struggling comic book label Valiant Comics, produce games based on the characters, and then branch out into various forms of merchandise. The plan was a complete failure by all accounts. For starters, the comic book industry had reached its lowest point in the 90s, so the purchase of Valiant Comics was basically the purchase of a failing business. It also didn't help that the lineup of characters they got out of the deal didn't carry the same weight as Spider-Man or Batman, so the games all underperformed, the sole exception being Turok, which probably did as well as it did because of the surge in interest for dinosaurs in the 90s as a result of the Jurassic Park movies. As a result, Acclaim would pivot to focus on Turok. Despite their best efforts, though, it wasn't long before the series ran out of steam and took Acclaim down with it. Turok would fade into obscurity, but the franchise has remained one of the iconic franchises of the N64. Even though these games are better played anywhere but the N64.
I am Turok!
In Turok, you take the role of Talset, a Native American warrior and current holder of the title of Turok. Turok is tasked with defending the barrier between our world and the Lost Lands, which is sort of a temporal crossroads where time has no meaning. An evil alien known as the Campaigner intends to use a powerful weapon hidden in the Lost Lands to break the barrier and wage war on Earth. So now Turok must enter the Lost Lands, find the weapon, and stop the Campaigner. Though the story of Turok is just context and isn't even presented in the game, I still love the hell out of it. The idea of a Native American warrior fighting dinosaurs, poachers, aliens, and robots is one of the most metal things I've ever heard of, and it makes Turok memorable, even after all these years. It makes me wish the game was a little more story-driven, but then again, the franchise did give that a try with later games, and it didn't do terribly well with it. I'm getting ahead of myself though. The premise is wicked cool, and that goes for the graphics as well. Turok was one of the first games to really put the N64 through its paces, and the results are pretty impressive. The levels are big and sprawling, and the character models and animations are complex and detailed, and there is a great deal of creativity in the enemy lineup and weapons loadout. Turok is often cited as an early example of gun porn, which refers to an FPS that ties a lot of its appeal into all the crazy weapons you can get your hands on, and that's an apt description. It's also interesting to note that while the game is called Dinosaur Hunter, dinosaurs are only one of a handful of enemies you'll face in the game. All this does come at a cost though. The levels are large, the game has a clear problem with draw distances, that clearly, ironically, coming in the form of ever-present fog and darkness. This was a common method developers used in the early days of 3D to hide graphical pop-in, and while some developers would leverage this for the purposes of gameplay, Turok does not. Not helping matters is the performance. It only takes a handful of enemies on screen at once to get the frame rate to drop, so the game is constantly chugging. At the very least, the music is good. It has a great tribal beat to it, and the sound effects are just awesome. Nothing like letting loose with the automatic shotgun and watching as your enemies choke on their own blood as they keel over. I'm a little concerned by how amusing I find that. Turok was also seen as something of a progression in the FPS genre when it came out. For starters, the controls are pretty innovative. You move Turok with the C buttons and aim with the joystick. A smart setup that isn't too far removed from a modern dual stick setup. You can even switch movement over to the D-pad if you want. This was a pretty big deal for console FPS games at the time because prior to this game, the controls for console FPS games weren't complex enough to keep up with the PC. The simple fact that you can circle strafe was a really big deal. That being said, the controls are still a little sloppy. Movement is a little imprecise, the aim snaps back to eye level every time you try to aim up and down, and cycling through the weapons is clunky. It's a step in the right direction, but it isn't exactly there yet. The shooting isn't that great either. Though it does strike a nice balance between hit scan and projectile-based shooting, the balance between the different enemy types and weapons isn't as prominent as it is in Doom or Duke Nukem or Quake. Most of the weapons are generally effective, so you probably won't be swapping on the fly or prioritizing enemy types. The level design and enemy placement kinda sucks too. The levels aren't exactly designed for large scale skirmishes, and enemies are often placed in positions where they will get the drop on you. Hell, sometimes they will even spawn enemies behind you, on you at times even. I also really hate that once you get certain better weapons, the old ones will still stay on your weapons wheel. For example, once you get the automatic shotgun, why would you ever switch back to the pump action? It's just more weapons that you have to cycle through in order to get to the one you want. Issues with the combat also sort of bring us to the game's biggest issue, and that's that Turok doesn't put as much focus on combat as you'd think. The focus is more on exploration, and while that isn't a big problem in and of itself, how it's executed is the issue. Now, exploration has always been a big part of the FPS genre, but it mostly served as a means to lead you through the levels. In Doom, for example, it's more stimulating to find a blue key card and then realize you use the key to access new parts of the level rather than walking down a never-ending corridor. However, that's not how it works in Turok. Instead, the game expects you to explore the levels to find keystones, and rather than opening up new parts of the levels, they instead unlock new ones. Kind of like the Power Stars in Super Mario 64. Thing is, you don't get the keystones by completing objectives, you just find them out on the level, and while they are laid along the path in the first level, come the second level, you'll find that they are instead hidden. Now, that is a big problem because the fog makes it difficult to read the levels. Yeah, there are visual hints that will give you an indication one of the keys is nearby, but they are easy to miss. So, rather than blazing through the levels, gunning down dinos, you'll probably be doing laps with the map up trying to spot hidden passageways. And don't even get me started on the platforming. The game is not designed for that, so it's bad enough when you miss a jump and have to climb back up to try again, but it's even worse when the platforming sections are placed over bottomless pits. I'm honestly flummoxed by how much is wrong with this game. For such a beloved classic, you'd expect better. Something else that got on my nerves is the fact that Turok is one of those games that doesn't save to the card. You need a memory pack in order to save your game, and I don't know if it's just me, but the memory packs are super unreliable in my experience. Seems like every time I buy one, it stops working as soon as I pull it out of the control. This is why I don't have footage of later sections of the game, I just wasn't able to make it that far. That's an even bigger issue considering that Turok is a pretty meaty game, clocking in at about 8 to 10 hours. The game is reasonably priced as well. Turok is another cheap and common game for the N64, so you shouldn't be paying more than $15 or $20 for it. Despite its myriad of issues, Turok was a big hit when it was first released. It sold millions, and Nintendo reported a surge in console sales when it came out. I don't know if Turok is worth buying a console for, but if it put more people onto the N64, I guess I shouldn't complain too much. Its success would lead to several follow-ups. Turok 2 Seeds of Evil is often regarded as the best game in the series due to its higher graphical fidelity, darker tone, and outrageous weapons, but it suffers a lot of the same problems the first game did. Thus, I'd take it or leave it. Seeds of Evil also sported a multiplayer mode, which I guess laid the groundwork for Turok Rage Wars, which was strictly a multiplayer game. And it's probably one of the worst games on the console, so don't bother. The last game on the N64 was Turok 3 Shadows of Oblivion, which was objectively the best one of the bunch, but its late release on the console meant it got overlooked in its day. It sort of spelled disaster for the next-gen game, Turok Evolution, which had an impact of a wet fart. With their star franchise bombing 3 times in a row, it wouldn't be long before Acclaim filed for bankruptcy. There was an attempt to revive the series in 2008, and while this game was marginally successful, fans felt it owed more to Halo and Gears of War than it did Turok. So yeah, Turok has had a really rough go at it, but as I've said, the game has managed to hang on to a dedicated group of fans over the years. Some of those fans would eventually enter the industry and bring back the original games with a new coat of paint. I'm of course referring to the remastered versions, courtesy of Night Dive Studios. These games make significant changes to the original games, and they are all the better for it. The graphics have been cleaned up, the fog and darkness have been significantly toned down, the enemy placement has been tweaked, new elements have been added to the levels to direct the player, and the performance is rock solid. Top it off with some silky smooth controls, and you got what is easily the definitive way to play Turok. Night Dive Studios have given this treatment to all 3 of the original games, so if what you have seen here piques your interest, be sure to check these out. So the Turok trilogy is living its best life beyond the N64, but that begs the question, will the series ever come back? Well, as a matter of fact, it is coming back. In 2024, it was announced that a new game called Turok Origins is set to release in 2026. Gotta be honest though, this isn't doing it for me. I was hoping for a wild and bloody frenetic FPS, but instead what we are getting is what appears to be something similar to Horizon Zero Dawn. If it gets good reviews, I guess I'll check it out, but I'm in no hurry to do so. But yeah, Turok rocks and has earned its place in the history of the FPS genre. Just don't actually play it on the N64. Get yourself one of the Night Dive remasters and never look back.